About 6 years ago, my friends and I decided to go out on a Saturday night. We went to a casino and a couple different bars. We ended up at a nightclub at about 2 a.m. I had been drinking and using cocaine for the evening. An Aquantus approached me and offered me an Altoid which contained hits of acid. I had never used hallucinogens up to this point. I took the whole Altoid not knowing how much acid it contained, and to this day I'm not sure how much I had. It kicked in quite rapidly. I began sweating and feeling good, I suppose. United, I started seeing things. I was smoking a cigarette and it began to grow as I could see it from my POV like a branch. The next thing I know, I was on the dance floor, presumably sloppy, and my roommate at the time told me it was time to go home. I remember feeling loopy and dazed for sure. The ride home was almost nauseating, and I remember thinking I couldn't wait to be home. Once I was home, everybody started to look cartoonish, but I was starting to freak out a bit. My roommate suggested I hit the weed and go to bed, which I did. I changed into a white t-shirt and a pair of Nike shorts. Shut the lights off in my room and turned a box fan on, and I laid on my bed to attempt to sleep. And this is where my story begins. I started to feel evil all around me. To this day, the most evil feeling I have ever felt. Almost like when you know you shouldn't be somewhere and you feel it in your gut that you're in the wrong place. That feeling x1000. I began to panic. I jumped out of bed, began pacing. I couldn't shake the evilness. The next thing I know, I ran to my car, barefoot, and began driving. I was going slow. I passed an ice cream shop and remember thinking all of the times my son had wanted to go there and I told him no. I started crying. I remember seeing a building in front of me and being unable to turn the wheel, almost paralyzed, but for whatever reason, it was almost like a glitch and I kept driving. Eventually, I made it about 12 blocks or so, and an old truck pulled up next to me and the driver motioned for me to roll down my window. He said, "I don't know what you're doing, but you need to pull over." And then he drove away. So, I did just that. I pulled off a side road, jumped out of my car and began running. My perception of time and space has disappeared. The faster I ran, in a large circle around a building, the more I started to understand life. At this point I was convinced that I had died. I kept thinking and being reminded in my thoughts of all of the bad things or sins that I had committed in life. It was horrible. I felt like I was experiencing all of the guilt and shame of the bad things I had done in my life all at the same time. To this day, the worst feeling I have ever felt. I remember running over rocks, but not feeling the pain on my feet. All of a sudden, the more I ran, the more life started to make sense. Everything seemed to be connected, and I felt as if God was showing me all of these things so that I could understand how powerful He is. I started crying out to God and Jesus, weeping and yelling at the top of my lungs for Him to save me. All of a sudden, a rainbow of lights came down from the sky and surrounded me. Instantly my worries were gone and I felt the most calm and loving wave of energy rush over and through me. This lasted maybe for a couple minutes and I was feeling so calm, loved, and accepted. I felt as if I died and that these lights were going to take them with me. I wasn't afraid and I was ready. Next thing I know, another light is being shined on me. This time from a police officer. I looked ahead and 2 officers were standing back on the round. I put my hands up and walked to them. One of them said, "Damn, how much whiskey did you drink tonight?" They told me later I couldn't pronounce my name, and that they could visibly see my heart beating from underneath my shirt. Paramedics came. I remember them laying me down on the stretcher, and the light and calm feeling began to fade. Almost like with every moment it got just a little less intense. I started to concentrate on it, physically reaching out to try to hold that feeling, but it kept going away. I remember a nurse saying, "Stay with me, stay with me." And then me thinking to myself in my head, "I'm so done, I'm ready to go," almost like I gave up and then I passed out. Next thing I know, I woke up the hospital a few hours later with a catheter and in 4. The nurses said I kept asking for a friend of mine who is deceased. But needless to say, I was released that day. This experience is something I almost think about daily and was life-changing for sure. Still trying to process.